Hey cool kids, I hope you guys are doing great. I'm just stopping by to introduce you to our story selection for this week and to get you familiar with the strategy and the skill that we're going to be using as we study this story. But first, a little humor. Can you guess this riddle? Why was the math book so sad? Why do you think it was sad? Guess why? Because it had so many problems. Do you get that? That was quite funny, wasn't it? Have a look at our objectives in this lesson. So at the end of this lesson, we should be able to identify the author's purpose and 2, summarize what has been read. We've spoke about author's purpose before. Every author has a purpose when they decide to write a story. When you write a story, you're an author and you have a purpose for why you are writing what you're writing, right? And usually the author's purpose usually falls into these 3 categories, which is to persuade, which you guys know what persuasion is, right? To convince the reader of a certain point of view, to inform, which is to teach or give information to the reader, or to entertain, which is to hold the attention of the reader through enjoyment, right? And these 3 key letters make up the word pie. So that's how you can remember the 3 different purposes an author might write a story or a selection. Now, depending on the author's purpose, you as the reader, or whoever the reader is, if it's someone that's reading your story, the reader has a job. So if the author's purpose was to persuade, the reader's job is then to look for opinions and reasons. What is the author's opinion about this particular matter and what are their reasons for feeling or thinking this way? If the author's purpose is to inform, then your job as a reader is to look for facts and to look for information throughout what the author has written. If the author's purpose is to entertain, then you're going to be looking at the characters and you're going to be thinking about what was the problem, what was the solution, right? What happened in the beginning, what happened in the middle, what happened in the end. Strategy we're going to use to help us as we read the story, to help us with understanding it and remembering it, is going to be summarizing. And we've looked at summarizing before. Summarizing is when you tell what's important in your own words. So when you read a story or when you read parts of a story, you should be able to retell that story in your own words. You shouldn't have to go back and look at it again, okay? So while you're reading, if you need to look back, you look back so that you're able to think about what you've read and you're able to summarize the story. So that helps you with remembering and it helps you with retelling if you have to tell someone about the story. Now, you do not have to wait until you get to the end of a story to try to summarize. While you're reading, whether it's after each page or every couple paragraphs, you can stop and think to yourself, what happened in the story? What was the author's purpose in those past few paragraphs? And you try to think about it, let it roll over in your mind, and then you try to retell it to yourself in your own words. So you don't have to depend on just looking in the book to find out everything. You're actually working on remembering and recalling information, and that's a great skill to have. So when you're summarizing, you can say who was the somebody, so who or what that particular part of the story was about, what they wanted or what they did, and but is what did they do, and as a result of that thing, so what did they do after that. So you're breaking it down and telling it in your own words. And we've done this before in class. As I told you guys before, you're gonna love the selection this week. Our selection this week is actually nonfiction, and it's actually what we call a biography. And a biography is actually a story that tells the events of a person's life, right? So this is based on a true story, okay? Now, in this selection, we're going to be talking a lot about communicating and ways to communicate. We're also going to learn about special ways to communicate for some special people that may have certain challenges, right? So this is a very interesting story and I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it, okay? So the story was written by Jane Sutcliffe and it was illustrated by Robert Papp. Now, as I told you before, it's a non-fiction story. It's a biography, so it's based on the real life of Helen Keller. Now, as you go about listening to this story today on a link that I've placed in your learning path, I want you to think about this essential question. How can you communicate in different ways? Now, when I look at the title of this story, I see it's about Helen Keller, right? So I think the girl in this picture must be Helen Keller. She's touching her dog. Could she be using her hands to feel what her dog looks like? Now, we're going to read to find out about Helen Keller's life and how she uses her hands to learn. So that's it, boys and girls. As you go about reading this story, I hope that you enjoy it and that you learn about different ways to communicate. Have a blessed day.